On December 22 last year, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, gave his country a unique Christmas gift. Together with his Secretaries of State and Defense, he announced the creation of what is called the Trump-class battleship. More than 8 decades have passed since battleships last dominated the seas, but now America's Commander-in-Chief has declared that this concept is coming back into fashion. And not only that, the entire new line of American battleships will even be named after him. Once these ships become fully operational, they will be the centerpiece of the United States' broader military plan, which Trump calls the newly launched Golden Fleet. Now, if all of this sounds like a nice joke for the holiday, think again. Because as of now, Donald Trump's Golden Fleet is an official policy of the United States. So it's only natural to ask, why is the United States investing in battleships again? These have been out of fashion for a long time now in the 2020s. What exactly is the Golden Fleet? How can America, a country with a clear shipbuilding crisis, carry out such a massive project? And does the Trump class have a chance to continue in Washington, D.C. even after Trump's term ends? But before we start, if you're new to our channel, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss videos like this. The Trump-class battleship. When Donald Trump unveiled the Trump-class battleship at a press conference at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, it quickly became clear that this project had 2 main objectives. First, it is a real battleship, a massive warship designed for surface combat and expected to become an important part of America's future naval fleet. Second, the Trump class is not just about combat. It is also a symbol of power, or in Trump's own words, it will be the flagship of the United States Navy. According to his speech, America's battleships have long been a clear symbol of national strength. His Secretary of Defense added that America's strength has once again returned to the world stage. In the following statements and press releases from the U.S. Navy, details about the Trump class gradually emerged. These ships are expected to be enormous, more than 3 times larger than the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, which is currently the main combat ship of the U.S. The Trump class will have a weight between 30,000 to 40,000 tons, compared to the approximately 9,500 tons of the Arleigh Burke, or 15,600 tons of the newer class of ships. It can reach speeds of over 30 knots, or about 55 kilometers per hour. In terms of size, it can reach up to 880 feet in length, 115 feet in width, and has a draft of 13 feet. Its crew ranges from 650 to 850 personnel. When it comes to weaponry, this is where it becomes truly unique. Some of the expected weapons to be installed are hypersonic missiles, extremely fast weapons that are currently being developed, laser weapons similar to Helios, electromagnetic railguns, nuclear-capable cruise missiles that are still in the prototype stage, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and 5-inch naval guns. For defense, it will use the RIM 116 rolling airframe missile against incoming aerial threats, along with 128 vertical launch cells for various missiles, plus 12 more for hypersonic weapons. For comparison, a typical Arleigh Burke only has 96 cells. This is not just a warship. It will also serve as a command and control hub for manned and unmanned systems, including drone ships and underwater vehicles. It will also feature AI capabilities. It also has a flight deck that can launch and receive aircraft like the V-22 Osprey and other helicopters. Overall, it is expected that 20 to 25 ships of this class will be built, although the first batch will have 10 units, with 2 of them to be completed on a faster timeline. The ships will be built in Philadelphia at a shipyard owned by South Korean Hanwha Group and will be supported by more than 1,000 suppliers from all over the United States. The design will be led by the U.S. Navy, but according to Trump, he will also personally get involved because he says he is a very aesthetic person. The first ship will be called USS Defiance, although it's unusual because the entire class of ships will still be called the Trump class instead of the Defiance class. According to Donald Trump again, he promised that these ships will be the fastest, the largest, and above all, 100 times more powerful than any battleship ever built before. U.S. Navy Secretary John Phelan also added that he called the upcoming USS Defiance the largest, most dangerous, most versatile, and most beautiful. Most beautiful? Well, who would care? It's a ship, not a fashion show. Its purpose is to fight, not to stand out. A question of value. Before we go any deeper, it's important to clarify two things about the Trump-class battleship. First, and most importantly, it's not a true battleship by American standards. Although the classification of the ship is at the discretion of the National Navy, this still matters because, in reality, the Trump class is smaller than traditional battleships. The last 4 battleships commissioned by the U.S. Navy during the World War II, such as the Iowa class, had a displacement of over 57,000 tons when fully loaded. Meanwhile, the Trump class is set to be only around 30,000 to 40,000 tons. That's less and closer to U.S. battlecruisers like the Alaska class, which had a displacement of 34,000 tons when fully loaded. If this distinction seems meaningless, you're not alone. For many naval enthusiasts, it doesn't matter whether you call it a battleship, battlecruiser, or canoe, as long as it serves its purpose. But the tonnage of the Trump class is mentioned because a ship's weight matters beyond simple classification, especially in modern naval warfare. Even though many navies abandoned the use of battleships after World War II, it wasn't because they couldn't be effective. The reason they became obsolete was because of the arrival of aircraft carriers, which could deploy dive and torpedo bombers capable of neutralizing battleships. From a technical perspective, they could have invested in building new battleships with extremely powerful anti-air weaponry to shoot down planes, but the cost and time required would have been extremely high. That's why no country made a serious attempt, and the battleship eventually disappeared from history. But this isn't simply a matter of technical possibility. It has more to do with the investment of resources. The problem with building an extremely expensive and sophisticated battleship with high tonnage is that it would require a huge amount of the country's time and resources just for that ship, which would eventually be sent into combat zones where the enemy would do everything to sink it. This is also the problem with aircraft carriers, but in recent decades, it's been easier to explain and justify the cost of aircraft carriers for several reasons. They are usually kept far from actual combat, protected by other warships, and by aircraft that can detect submarines and other threats. They see them as instruments of power projection, so the cost is worth it even with the risks. But even with aircraft carriers, naval experts have long been warning that the calculus is changing. The increasingly powerful and more maneuverable hypersonic anti-ship weapons are becoming a growing threat, especially from China. Smaller and easier to sink ships like battle cruisers are also easily targeted by cheap surface or submersible naval drones. For example, in 2022, a smaller Russian guided missile cruiser, which was the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, was sunk by 2 Ukrainian anti-ship missiles. The estimated value of that ship when it was sunk was around $750 million, while the 2 missiles that brought it down cost only a total of $3 million. In a broader context, the 2020s is a period where surface naval vessels are constantly at risk, and concentrating high-value technology, personnel, and munitions on a large floating platform is becoming more dangerous and impractical, both strategically and financially. So the main problem with introducing a ship like the Trump class, whether it's a battleship, battlecruiser, or any other type, is concentrating 30,000 to 40,000 tons worth of assets on a single platform. This includes the cost of materials, onboard sensors, advanced weapon systems, and the crew that will operate it. Currently, all evidence from global naval engagement suggests that it's better to focus on small, inexpensive platforms, whether manned or unmanned, that remain effective even if many are lost in battle. Building the Trump class in the way it's being described now is the opposite of standard strategy and could be considered a waste of resources. Although Washington has not yet released any official cost, external estimates say it could reach up to $5 billion per ship. For comparison, Ukraine's Sea Drone can carry an explosive warhead of up to 850 kilograms, enough to penetrate modern armor. and it only costs $240,000. That's only about 121,000th of the estimated cost of the Trump class. The construction of the Trump class is likely thicker than what current naval drones can penetrate. However, with the rapid advancement and versatility of naval drone technology, it's not surprising that the enemy is responding by developing higher payload unmanned surface vessels. This doesn't mean that the Trump-class warships are bound to fail. Just like the decline of traditional battleships during World War II, there are ways to make a modern battlecruiser more robust and survivable. The question is the cost for survivability worth it? In analyzing the Trump class, it seems to be a calculated risk. This means that the designers understand that there is a limit to the value of large ships in modern naval combat, but they might also believe that the balance will shift again in the future. This is also shown by the range of new weapon systems that the Pentagon wants to include, from directed energy laser weapons, railguns, to hypersonic missiles. In this way, the large investment in the Trump class will be worthwhile, because unlike Russian warships and other ships that are easily attacked by unmanned systems, the Trump class can protect itself against those threats. However, there are some major problems. First, most of these weapon systems are still unproven. For example, the US Navy has only just begun integrating hypersonic missile launch cells on the first Zumwalt-class destroyers. The Helios directed energy system has only been integrated on one Arleigh Burke-class destroyer for testing, and it still falls short of the target. The US Navy stopped experimenting with railgun technology in 2021. Because of integration issues, even though it works in vacuum testing, relying on unproven technology carries many risks. The delivery or production of the tech could be delayed. It might not work as promised. It could work but be slow, which would stop the new battlecruisers at the port, or force them to deploy with limited capability. In addition, the current countermeasures put in place by the U.S. seem to not take into account kamikaze-style surface and undersea threats, which have actually been used by Ukraine and non-state actors like the Houthis. Not planning for this would be a major oversight. As we examine the broader possibility of the Trump-class battleship, we also need to discuss the larger concept of Trump's Golden Fleet, the new generation of naval combat vessels that will join the battle. According to the plans, the new Golden Fleet is expected to have unmanned surface and undersea vessels of various types, as well as a new line of aircraft carriers, which Trump mentioned in his speech but did not explain in detail. Next generation submarine. It could be the Columbia class that is currently being built, or possibly a new replacement. Aside from the Trump class, another important announcement from the Navy about their future fleet is the new frigate called the FFX, which will replace the canceled Constellation-class frigate program after it encountered serious problems and delays. The new FFX is expected to be based on the Legend-class cutter of the U.S. Coast Guard. It's a proven design that is well known and favored by the Coast Guard, although it is smaller. Compared to the original Constellation class, it can be built quickly. Its redesign is limited to only a few changes from the Legend class to avoid major design changes which became a problem with the Constellation class. However, the new FFX is expected to be underpowered. According to the military outlet The White, it will not have a vertical launch system for missile launches, which they called a clear deficiency, and it raises questions about the operational utility and flexibility of the ship. Instead, the FFX will serve as a mothership for the USVS, with the option to carry modular containerized missile launchers. However, the missile capability is limited, although there are plans to modify it in the future. The main objective is to be able to get ships into the water quickly. The FFX represents a new and untested approach to America's naval warfare, and it seems that the Trump-class battleship is making these problems worse. The FFX has no launch array. It does not learn from the shortcomings of previous U.S. Navy frigate designs. The Trump class, on the other hand, seems to not be learning the bigger lessons of naval warfare. We're not the only ones saying this. According to Mark Montgomery, currently the senior director, for the FFX, the Trump class is exactly what we don't need. He also accused the Navy that it's focused on the president's view that the Battleship is a cool ship. Mark Kenyon, who writes for the Center for Strategic and International Studies, he said that this ship will never float. And he quoted again, "The next administration will cancel the program before the first ship even sails." There are also some experts who favor the new design. According to Brian Clark in the Wall Street Journal, stronger ships are important to protect U.S. carriers, and the right power requires ships that are 2 or 3 times the size of the Arleigh Burke class. This argument is correct, but it is based on the assumption that all advanced technology will be ready and will work during operations at an international range. Even countries that build larger warships, like Germany's F-127 and South Korea's Sejong the Great class, are expected to have only 1/3 the tonnage of the Trump class. From a financial perspective, Clark said there isn't enough funding to pay for all the ships, especially while also trying to finance the 6th-generation FXX warplane, which U.S. Navy leaders successfully lobbied to save from cancellation. From a broader perspective, this plan for a new Golden Fleet seems to overlook how shipbuilding actually works in the U.S. It's slow, large, and lacks capability. There are always more design revisions. Costs and delays keep increasing. And there are many promising projects, but ultimately, doomed designs have become the norm. Trump's timeline for the first ship is extremely ambitious. It is scheduled to be commissioned within 2.5 years. Although this may be a vote of confidence in the ability of the U.S. to overcome the problem, it wouldn't be fair to say that it is deserved. The shipbuilding in the U.S. for this, in fact, according to naval officials who spoke privately with the war zone, the construction of the first 2 Trump-class ships will not begin until the early 2030s. The companies chosen for the project say they are ready to face the challenge. These are defense corporations with interest in contracts, and they have incentives to overpromise. Even they themselves have doubts. U.S. Navy officials have also confirmed that one of the main reasons for rushing these programs is the need to immediately get hulls in the water to keep up with China. But hulls in the water are useless if the warships surrounding them can't operate in real combat. Here at Naval Polo TV, we want to emphasize a broader reality. America's naval procurement strategy has been broken for decades. And the frustrations shown by the Trump class and FFX are completely justified. But if the U.S. wants to remain competitive in the global seas, the answer isn't simply to build something cool and hope for the best. What is the alternative? That is for America's smartest naval minds to discover. But you don't need an alternative anymore. We've already seen America taking huge risks by relying on Trump's version of the Golden Fleet. Thank you very much for watching.